I need to get something off my chest. By the way, minor spoilers ahead for both Toy Story 4 and The Shining. So I went to see Pixar's latest film, Toy Story 4. Long review short, I loved it and thought it was one of the best films Pixar has put out in a long time. You can hear my extended thoughts on my podcast. Yes, that is right, I have a podcast, make sure to check it out. I've always loved Pixar for their Easter eggs that they throw in each film. It makes for a much more interactive and self-aware viewing experience and really makes the studio seem a bit more human. Toy Story 4 definitely did not disappoint in that department with what appeared to be Boo from Monsters Inc., that one guy from their early short film, and one that I wanted to talk about today that involves The Shining. After a few hours of thinking about it, I've come to the conclusion that I have a theory. That theory being Toy Story 4 is a prequel to The Shining. Let's start with connections that you cannot argue against. My initial Easter egg realization was when Woody and Forky enter the Second Chance antique store. They meet up with these spooky dolls, and then the music from The Shining literally starts playing on the record player. This isn't like The Shining score or anything either. It's not like The Shining film exists in this movie. It's literally the song Midnight, The Stars and You by Ray Noble and his orchestra, implying that in this universe that song exists in both Toy Story 4 and The Shining. This makes even more sense considering this record is in an antique shop because this song was originally playing in the ballroom in The Shining in 1921, so it makes sense for it to be this old. But you also have a bunch of references in earlier films as well. In the original Toy Story, you literally see the shining carpet when they are in Sid's house, and in Toy Story 3, there are 3 references to the number 237, aka the famous room number from The Shining. My point is, Pixar has given us a variety of hints to imply that these two films live in the same universe. Already convinced? Well, buckle up, because we are just getting started. If you saw Toy Story 4, you know that a common theme they discuss is the voice in your head, otherwise known as your conscience. Now here's the thing, this could have just been a short little joke of Buzz not fully knowing what your conscience means, but they keep it going, and the quote-unquote voice in your head term pops up constantly throughout the film. The meaning behind the title of The Shining comes from Dick Halloran's description of a telepathic power that him and Danny share, which they refer to as the voice in their head. He refers to the power as being able to have full conversations without ever opening their mouths. Hey, Sharon, can you play the clip?
My grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths.
This is a power that is also shared by what seems to be all the toys and is actually a pretty huge plot point in Toy Story 4, as Gabby wants Woody's voice box in an attempt to acquire his power. With that being said, if Danny and Dick have the same power as toys, does this mean that they are toys? Of course they are. It's just simple math, folks. I mean, think about it. The addition of Forky really introduced this idea into what it means to be a toy. When looking at what counts as a toy physically and what purpose toys play, the definition for what a toy can be is somewhat ambiguous to a point where maybe Danny is a toy himself. Now here's the thing. Danny's story, or should I say Toy Story, and how it plays into The Shining is very exclusive to that film. That's a movie worth years of analysis. I'm not even going to touch it. I just want to focus on how we got from this to this. While the other Toy Story films basically give us evidence that these films are in the same world, what this fourth film is doing is basically creating setups that will later be acted upon in The Shining. I think a major character that gives this whole thing away is the old woman from the Second Chance antique shop. There is a specific scene in Toy Story 4 where we see Bunny and Ducky voiced by Key and Peele, going over different scenarios where they attack the woman. In the third and final scenario, they suggest following her home, and in one shot we see the woman chilling in the bathtub, this is important, and later attacking her in her sleep. Pixar is all about tight storytelling and rarely letting any excess meat get through, so for them to keep this long bit in the film, it says something. It suggests that maybe this old woman is the same old woman we find in The Shining, soaking and left murdered in the tub. Everyone has their own theories, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this old woman in The Shining was murdered by Ducky and Bunny from Toy Story 4. And then, we also have Buttercup, who plays an essential role here. A running bit in Toy Story 4 is that Buttercup wants to put the dad in jail for reasons God knows what, but he attempts to get him pulled over by the cops for reckless driving. But as we see in the movie, he fails because, you know, Disney isn't gonna pull that shit. So, Buttercup gets a second chance in The Shining by either killing Jack or sending him to jail for attempted murder. What does Buttercup have against dads? Who knows, but it's a thing. You might be wondering, how did Buttercup do this? Well, on the website for Thinkaway Toys, aka the main toy company that sells Toy Story merchandise, Buttercup's description reads, "Saddle up for fun and let Buttercup lead your child away on a magical adventure." This implies that Buttercup has magic powers that he used to put Jack in this state. Now I know what you're thinking. How can The Shining come after Toy Story when The Shining takes place in the 80s and Toy Story takes place in maybe the 90s? Well, your answer is right there. We don't really know when Toy Story takes place. There are a few spots of evidence, but they're nothing that really confirms it. We never really see any phones or modern technology in the Toy Story films that I know of, so it really could take place anywhere. Lastly, I want to touch on a clue that's been here all along. I want to come back to the voice inside your head thing. Moving back to The Shining, not only does Danny refer to this voice as being someone in his head, but he refers to it as his friend. Why does this matter? Well, it's worth looking at Toy Story's theme, "You've Got a Friend in Me." Danny literally has a friend in him. Looking at the lyrics, when the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, that is literally the situation Danny is in during The Shining. The evidence is right there, and I'm sorry, but after knowing this, I'm not sure you're going to be able to enjoy this song the same way. Everyone asks, why didn't they leave it at 3 movies? Why did they have to make a 4th one? Well, folks, there's your answer. It had to happen, because without this story, who knows if The Shining would exist today. Thank you again for watching, and this is the FBI, open up!